Hello, let me tell you about a story about a detective called Mason. He had a brilliant idea for investigating crime scenes. The idea wasn't his, of course. It had been used for years and years and could have been forgotten about, but different investigators still use it when investigating crime scenes. The idea is creating a miniature model of the whole crime scene. For instance, if it was a farmhouse with 2 people and one stabbed with a knife, then create a model of that entire scene. Mason used to find it very helpful to be able to look at the model of the crime scene and go through it in his mind what could have happened. This method helped Mason solve lots of different crimes. Mason's wife Susan was a teacher in the local school and used to often worry about Mason out and about in his job, but she used to like when he was in the basement with his crime scene miniatures because she knew he was safe at home and wasn't in the way of any criminal that could harm him or worse, kill him. One day there was a murder in the school and Mason had to do a miniature of the hallway by the lockers where the murder took place. He knew that there was just lockers, a school bag and a boy that seemed to have been hit by a hammer. Mason was working hard trying to figure out what he could see in it. Sometimes he wondered, was it harder there being a lot to the scene or less? But he knew one thing, that no matter how much there was in the scene or how little, it seemed to help him having a miniature model. That night Mason seemed to have had a nightmare and woke up feeling agitated after it. He got up to get a glass of water. On his way, by accident, he knocked against his wife's handbag and it fell to the floor, with some of its contents spilt out on the floor. He froze in fear when he saw what he saw staring up at him from the floor. It was a hammer with what looked like blood on the top. He looked back at the bed, hoping Susan wouldn't wake up. He put it together. Susan had been talking about a boy who was constantly bullying her behind people's backs, and she was afraid to tell anyone because she felt they would think she had no control over her students. Mason knew the student was hit with a blunt object, which was very highly likely to be the hammer. Mason felt movement from the bed and quickly put the hammer back into Susan's bag. He went down to the kitchen and drank some water and then walked back to the basement and looked at the miniature model. He imagined Susan striking the student on the head with a hammer and knew that he heard the CCTV footage was missing, and that would be explained by Susan being able to have access to it to delete it. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. Suddenly he heard movement behind him and looked around. His wife Susan was standing next to him with a miniature model of himself lying in a pool of blood. She put the miniature model of him down on the ground and said, "Well, Mason, I was really hoping it wouldn't come to this, where I have to finish this miniature crime scene, but it looks like I'll have to make the background or basement." She pulled out a gun and shot Mason in his head. 6 months later, Susan was speaking at the book launch of her bestseller called My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. She spoke into the mic with emotion. "I am here today talking about my book, which is a way of me coping with the murder of my hard-working husband, who was passionate about figuring out ways of solving crimes by using miniature crime scene models. The title is long, but I couldn't think of any other appropriate title to use other than My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. My husband was such a loving man, and the only time I was truly content with him working on his investigations was when he was in the basement working on his miniature crime scene models. After my husband died, I tried to harness my emotions into making a miniature crime scene of him in honor of him. I would love if my husband was still alive and I didn't have to write this book, but I want to speak out to the many wives of men like my husband. Don't take a day for granted, because if your husband is working in a dangerous line of work like mine was, then his life could be snuffed out at any minute. The crowd were lapping up Susan's speech, and Susan was enjoying knowing she would get lots of royalties from her books and TV appearances, etc., and her bully was out of the way. She paused for a moment, thinking to herself, I didn't want to appear a pushover teacher by saying I couldn't control my student, and I didn't want to harm my loving husband, but I had to. I wasn't a murderer, so it's better I got a book deal and wasn't cut out as the murderer. They would think I was some sort of psycho. She saw a fly land in her hand and thought to herself, after all, I wouldn't hurt a fly. Jack was a criminal into all sorts of criminal activity. He was in court for so many different crimes. He spent 10 years in prison, but since he was released, he didn't get reformed. He just got better at not being caught for whatever crimes he committed. During his last court appearance, the judge had told him that if he keeps getting arrested, he will be put into prison for good. One night, Jack was trying to rob a bank, but then it went horribly wrong, and he ended up shooting a police officer. He knew it was the death penalty for capital punishment. While he was waiting on death row, there were several groups against the death penalty and wanting to ban it outright. He sat in prison writing and writing about his feelings, trying to pass the time. He had no access to the internet or newspapers, but still found out about the groups that were pushing for the death penalty to be banned. It was a prison warden on death row told him the first day it was finalized he would not be getting the death penalty. He would not be sentenced to death. He was relieved, but then felt even sicker, knowing he would be locked up in a prison for years and years until he finally died. He wondered how he would stay sane. To his surprise, one day, a man in a suit opened his cell and said to him, "Hello, Jack. My name is Terry. I am the head of New Beginnings. I am the leader of the group that has successfully banned the death penalty. You are the first person we are trying the alternate punishment out on. You just need to go through a quick operation and then you are free to go out into the outside world." Jack couldn't believe his ears and knew there must have been a catch. The next day he was lying in a room with doctors all around him, and when he woke up, the doctor said, "Hi Jack, your procedure is done and you are free to go." Jack asked what was the catch, and they told him, "You will see, but don't worry Jack, you won't be hurt and you won't ever get locked up again." When Jack left the room, none of the officers acknowledged him or said goodbye or good luck. When he was walking down the street, no one acknowledged him. It wasn't until he tried to make a phone call from when he was home he found something strange. No matter what number he rang or text he tried writing, nothing happened. He knocked at his friend's door. There was no answer. Suddenly his friend's car pulled up in his driveway, and Jack said, "They set me free," but his friend didn't seem to hear him. He didn't see him. And then he knew. The new punishment for him not getting the death penalty was being immortal, invisible, and alone, with no chance of lifting an object to let anyone know he was there. He knew he was immortal because there was a voice inside his head told him. But that voice told him that now that he knows he will be alone, it also told him no matter what he lifts, he will think he lifted it. He will think he opened doors. He will think he threw glasses if that's what he done. But to anyone else, there will be no one or nothing there. Jack would be invisible, alone, and immortal. It was a lovely summer's day, and me and my friend were taking a trip in my private helicopter. Everything was going great. We were enjoying the view until we started to fly over my house. I noticed something strange. It was like a masked man was carrying my wife to my outside pool to throw her in. I quickly told my friend, "Look below, what's going on? Do you see down below? There's someone carrying my wife into the pool." I quickly flew the helicopter down and saw that a masked man was carrying my wife, and just as he got low, we could see him throw her into the pool. He ran away, and when the helicopter eventually landed, he was well gone. I ran over to the pool and jumped in, but by the time I did, my wife had already drowned. My friend rang the police for me, and when they came, I told them what had happened. We were flying over my house when all of a sudden I could see a masked man carrying my wife and throwing her into the pool. They asked did I have any enemies, but I couldn't think of any. My wife was in the bat, and I walked in, knowing what I had to do. I grabbed her by the neck and put her under the water until she stopped breathing. Then, when I knew she had died, I rang the girl of my dreams, who kept at me the last few months to end it with my wife once and for all. It was her plan. When she answered the phone, I told her what to do. "It's done, she's dead, but what you need to do is wait until about 3 p.m. tomorrow, dress up as a man, put your hair up, I'll convince my friend you're a man, carry my wife, I'll fly over the house in the helicopter, and when you see us go lower, run up to the swimming pool. I'll fly over the house in the helicopter, and when you see us go lower, run up to the swimming pool as if my wife was alive until you threw her into the pool. If they think it's a man that drowned her in the swimming pool, there is no way they will trace the real drowning back to me drowning her in the bat. And remember, the most important thing, baby, is I love you." Who is Short Story 1? He is a horror writer who writes on horror subreddits on Reddit. His stories are vastly unique and sometimes don't even make sense. He has had a couple of popular short horror stories that was well upvoted and lots of Reddit users had commented on. Short Story hardly ever replies to comments, and one theory suggests is that he is a mental patient in an institute for the insane. Some even suggest that he has had multiple brain surgeries and was even experimented on. This would explain for Short Story 1's weird plots that don't make sense, because insane people don't make sense. Another theory is that Short Story 1 is 1,000 years old, and because he has lived a long, so long life, his stories are a reflection of what he has experienced throughout the ages. This would also explain why his grammar is terrible, because language has changed so much in the last 1,000 years, and Short Story 1 has failed to keep up. Another theory is that Short Story 1 is an actual alien that is just having fun with the humans on Reddit. Short Story 1 being an alien would explain so much about his writing and why it's so absurd. Maybe Short Story 1 is lost in our planet and has no idea what he is doing at all. Short Story 1 is maybe an alien that has transformed into a human and is struggling dealing with the human mind and emotions. The last and most likely theory is that Short Story 1 is artificial intelligence robot and someone experimenting the robot by letting it write stories on Reddit and seeing humans react to it. As we know, technology is evolving so fast, and robots in the future are now a strong possibility. Driverless cars have evolved so much, and Short Story 1 might be a robot that can imagine. Who do you think Short Story 1 might be? Have you read his stories? Fred owned an art gallery, but he was very upset, knowing he hardly sold a painting in a week, and he knew that if he didn't earn enough money to get on top of the bills, soon then he would have to close the gallery down. He was sitting in a bar one night, telling his friend he had to close the gallery if he could not come up with some miracle to bring in more revenue than he already was. A few minutes later, he went up to the bar to buy a drink, when he realized there was a strange-looking man dressed in a black suit staring right at him. Then the man handed him a card and said, "I couldn't help but hear your sad story about the gallery. I have an amazing idea that will no doubt keep your gallery open. Just don't tell your friend over there or anyone else. Call me anytime." That night when Fred got home, he sat down on his sofa, wondering what the man's idea was and why he was so adamant to him not tell anyone about it. He rang the man's number and there was an answer. The man's voice spoke. "Hello there. Thanks so much for calling. Now I am just going to come right out with it. I have the most amazing art display this city will ever see, and you can have it free of charge, but you will need to shut the gallery for just 24 hours, and let me and my people set it up. The main thing is that it is going to be behind reinforced bulletproof glass, and should never, and I repeat, never ever, open the glass. There are just 2 rules. That is 1, don't open the glass, and don't tell anyone I told you this is a guaranteed success. Before you have any questions, let me explain how this will help your gallery. This display will bring art lovers from all over the country and all over the world. It will spread like wildfire. How amazing it is. Just remember, never open the glass and don't tell anyone about it. Getting back to the glass, there won't be a key, there won't be a lever to open it or a handle, but just make sure not to damage the wall around it or anything that could affect the glass. Fred could not take in what the strange man was telling him, but he felt he had no other choice to agree with the man, so he said, "Okay, whatever display you have, I will shut the gallery for all of next Monday. To you, have it set up, but can you at least tell me what it is?" The man ignored his question and said, "I will see you Monday morning at 7 a.m. and also, you cannot be in the gallery when it has been set up." On Tuesday morning, Fred opened his gallery and wondered what the display was. He was shocked to see a very weird set of mannequins posed as in a zombie movie. He soon forgot how weird they looked when crowds of people flocked into the gallery to see the display, and they loved it. And also, they seemed to pick up a few paintings as they stayed there. By the end of the day, he had already made enough money to pay the bills that he had outstanding. He received a call from the strange man, and the man asked Fred, "So Fred, how is it going?" Fred said it was going brilliantly, thanks so much. Just remember the rules. Don't tell anyone I told you it would turn the gallery into a success. And remember, don't ever have the wall or glass damaged. The call ended. Later on that night, when everyone was enjoying themselves, Fred couldn't keep the secret any longer. He was speaking to a lady he admired for a long time and told her about how a man told him it would turn his gallery around, and he knew that the gallery would go from strength to strength. Suddenly there was a loud noise, and the room shaked. He'd realized it was an earthquake. Then there was another noise, and the room shook again. The glass shattered, and everyone screamed as the mannequins turned into real zombies and started walking around the room, killing everyone they came across. One zombie looked right at Fred and said, "You had only 2 rules. Don't tell anyone. This was promised to bring you success. And don't break the glass. Unfortunately for you, breaking one rule led to the glass being broke." The zombie grabbed Fred and proceeded to strangle him and eat him. Then took a drink from a glass of champagne and said, "It's a true saying, art imitates life." The strange man looked from across the street and said to himself, "It is such a shame that poor man didn't just stick to his rules he was given." And then the strange man went about his business of looking for someone else down on their luck. It was a Friday night and I was scrolling through my phone when I opened the TikTok app. I scrolled through it, then noticed I had a message. I opened the message and it was from a guy called Frank. He said, "You were looking beautiful at the mall today." I blocked him instantly as I felt a shiver run up my spine. I just put it down to some creep trying to freak me out, so I didn't pay much more attention to it. The next day, I was in the mall with my friends, and we were just walking after coming down the escalator when a man was standing in front of me as I got off. I said, "Excuse me," very politely. He turned around and said, "I'm very sorry for blocking you. Please pass." His words, "very sorry for blocking you," sounded so creepy. It felt as if he was the guy who had sent me the message last night. But how could that be? I told my friends, and they agreed it all sounded a bit creepy the way he worded it. I was hoping it was just a coincidence. That night when I went home, I received another message, which must have been the same guy. This time he said, "You shouldn't have blocked me." He must have set up a new account to just send me that. I jumped when I suddenly heard a noise outside my door. There was a piece of wood stuck up against it, with "You're blocked" written on it. I was shaking with fear and went to my window to try to get out, but I knew it was too high, and when I looked down, I could see the man below from the mall staring right up at me. I rang the police and stayed in my room until they came. When they arrived, the wood was gone from my door, and the man was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't understand the wood disappearing from my door. Then suddenly I woke up. Everything was dark. I know now what woke me. It was my phone. I answered it and could hear a man's voice. As I was saying, "You shouldn't have blocked me," I screamed, "Let me out, let me out." The man said, "There is a straw in your coffin underground. I will be taking that straw out in just under 5 minutes. There had been oxygen pumped into your coffin, but when that's gone, I'm afraid you're on your own. But I threw you a lifeline. I sent your friend a message on TikTok, telling her where you are. If they're a real friend, they will find their way here to save you. But then again, they will need to bring a shovel, etc. So the time is ticking. Tick tock, tick tock," he said in a very creepy voice. Then there was silence. What seemed like an hour later, I could hear police sirens, and I thanked God my friend had rang them and got here on time. I was afraid after that to ever go on TikTok again. The man's voice rang in my ears. Tick tock, tick tock.
Hi, this is Kate Valentine. I'm responding about the request you put on the police auction materials. I bought a few kids' books from that auction, actually a whole crate of them. At the time, I didn't look at them, I just put them on the bargain shelf in order of the author's names. I had never heard of the author or the book title, so I gave them all orange stickers, which meant 50 cents each. One day, it was particularly dead, so I paged through them, and I noticed this one with very simple, minimalistic drawings called Dave's Days. There was no cohesive story. Unlike other children's books that use each page as a part of a lesson, here there was none of that. One page was the Dave character sitting at a kitchen table with a mug in front of him. He was the kind of stick figure you see on bathroom doors. Dave's kitchen was written in block letters above him. The whole book was like that. Just Dave, sitting alone in one setting or another. The park, the library. I put the book away and looked through the others and found another one in the Dave series. This one was called Dave and His Friends. The cover was Dave outside his house, like the first, but Next to him stood a little girl with a blonde ponytail. 2 boys and a girl, all brown-haired with freckles, looked out from the window inside the house. This book was all about Dave and these kids doing things together and going places like to the park and getting ice cream. Every time Dave did something nice for them, they'd say, "Dave is my friend." But since no one has a mouth and therefore no one is smiling, it only makes the whole thing odd, like when you read a happy text message without an exclamation mark. I put the book away. Later that night, I decided to Google the titles of the books. When I got nothing, I just Googled the things in the book, and eventually I Googled the phrase, "Dave is my friend." An article came up. It was about a girl named Jennifer Holland who had gone missing sometime earlier and about how her parents hadn't given up hope. It also alluded to police being suspicious of them as the circumstances of her disappearance were strange. They said they woke up to find their front door open and Jennifer gone. 2 things really struck me from the article. The first was that the last name Holland seemed significant. I couldn't remember why until I went back to the Dave books and saw that Dave lived in Hollandtown. The second thing, I'll get to that in a sec. After hours of searching for more information, I stumbled across a forum. I don't remember where, maybe on Reddit, but one subject said, "Has anyone read Dave and the Others?" It was a guy with the handle Oregon Ollie who had found an eerily similar book. The post was 2 years old. Later, I searched for Oregon Ollie, but his account was inactive. When he Googled the book, he didn't find anything either. But, like me, he started Googling everything in the book and found a news story, just like I had. 3 siblings had been found dead at Chipewyan Lake in Canada. They lay on the shore, holding hands. Their last name was Robin. They died from exposure. Mr. and Mrs. Robin woke up in the middle of the night by a cold wind the night their kids went missing. The door had been left wide open. It was January. The police found a note at the Robin home left by the kids, but the article said the investigators would not release the contents to the public. Oregon Ollie said that in his book, there were 3 red robins that would fly over Dave's head when he got sad. The book was mostly a man walking the city sidewalks at night or sitting at a park bench alone with the stars over him. Whenever Dave seemed sad, the robins would come and fly over his head, and he would just look up and watch. The second thing that I mentioned earlier that struck me in the first article I read was that Jennifer Holland had drawn a picture before she went missing. It was of a stick figure man and herself. Her parents didn't know what it was. She had written, "Dave is my friend," on it. I don't have the books anymore. I went back through them after reading Oregon Ollie's account, and seeing those 3 kids in the window of Dave's house freaked me out, so I threw them away. I still think about it, though. Sometimes I wish I kept them, but the thought of having them near me gives me the chills. I wasn't going to mention this, but after I read the Reddit account, I wrote my own post about it. No one ever picked up on it, but right after that, I started getting phone calls. When I answered, I would hear some electrical buzzing, but that was it. First, the calls were just at my house, but then I got them on my cell and even at work. Slowly, it died down, but I still get them from time to time. The last thought that crosses my mind when I lock my doors at night is, I wonder if it's Dave calling me. And I wonder if he's there somewhere, watching my house when I go to bed. Sometimes I move my bureau in front of the door just to be safe.
Yeah!
David was a host of a mystery dinner night. There were lots of nods to Hitchcock movies scattered around the house, and there would be a murder, not real of course, happen, and the guests were to find out which person in the house was the killer. There were 4 guests, 2 men and 2 women. The man that was putting on the event said to the guests, "Hello, my name is David, and I have rented out this luxurious old house to hold what was to be a very exciting and thrilling night. There will be tributes throughout the house that pay tribute to different movies from Hitchcock, and you will be able to maybe put 2 and 2 together with different clues left around the house as to who the murderer is. We will be starting the night with a brief introduction by the man himself, who is played by the winner to play the role of Alfred Hitchcock, who is Eugene, who I must say strikes an uncanny resemblance to Alfred Hitchcock himself. I had auditions from lots and lots of different people, but I'm sure Eugene will play the role of Mr. Hitchcock perfectly himself. I must let you know that Eugene, or should I say Alfred, knows who the killer is, so maybe you can try to play friends with him to try to get information out of him. He isn't going to spill the beans, of course, but you never know. If you're that clever, you might be able to get information out of him that he doesn't even realize he is giving. From here, friends, I introduce you to Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. Eugene stood in front of the 2 men and 2 women. They were very surprised by how Eugene had looked like Alfred Hitchcock. He spoke. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this amazing Alfred Hitchcock mystery murder night. We will start the night with a very tasty meal, and things will get very exciting very soon. You will be able to find clues and different items around the house that will have a link to different movies from me, and they might be a link to the murder, or maybe not. It is for you to decide. Enjoy the evening, everyone." Both couples sat down and enjoyed their meal. It took them about an hour to have the starter and main course and dessert gone. Right then, Alfred came out again and said, "Okay everyone, explore the house, find the body, and solve the murder. And as ye know, before even coming here, the winner will win £10,000. And I know ye are 2 couples, so ye can have that money if ye so choose with your partner. Good luck everyone." Both couples walked around the house. One couple was Matt and Susie. They entered a room with a curtain and a rope hanging on the wall, and both realized it was a reference to Hitchcock movies, The Rope and Torn Curtain. But there was no body, so they didn't see any other relevance to it. The other couple were Sharon and Michael. They entered a room where there was a wheelchair and a camera by the window. Instantly, they knew it was a reference to Rear Window. They were expecting to see a shower with blood on it as a reference to Psycho somewhere in the house, but Mr. Hitchcock's most known movie, Psycho, was nowhere to be found. There was a person walked into the room, and the couple jumped. It was a man who said, "Hello, sir and madame. I am the butler in this house. If you would like me to assist ye in any way, please just ring the bell that is placed in the hall by the telephone." A woman had entered the room, and when she saw them, walked back out. A few minutes later, they heard a scream from the window and ran over to look. To their surprise, they had seen the woman who had just been in the room earlier had ran away from a body. The shock came to them when they had told Alfred, and he had looked with shock, knowing that wasn't the fake murder planned for their mystery murder night. When they went down to investigate, they both realized that the dead body was actually real. The body was of the butler. A couple of minutes later, Eugene rang David, and David rushed outside. He looked shocked. Michael told him that it was a woman who had murdered the man. They saw her running away. David froze and said, "I know who the killer was." They all looked shocked and asked who. He took out a knife and stabbed the couple, and turned to Eugene. "Mr. Hitchcock, do you think I would forget a reference to your movie Psycho? Let me introduce you to my character. My name is Norman Bates. Now you can leave, as I don't want to hurt you, but just to let you know how well I planned the twist. The killer was Mother." Eugene ran and ran, knowing that the host of the party was a real killer, believing he was Norman Bates, and also was dressed up as his mother, who was the woman who killed the butler and couple. A few minutes later, after Eugene rang the police, they arrived to see the other couple dead in a room full of birds eating them. I can't stop singing the Sunday song every Sunday. It goes like this. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, and then a Tuesday, with some sad tune coming from somewhere. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, and then a Tuesday. It's that dreaded fear of Sunday being the day which starts off the horrid work week. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, then a Tuesday. No, just stop it, man, stop being so weird. I get so weird on Sunday and full of dread as the thought of going back to work just fills me with horror. I try to put on the Friday song by Dubsky, and as I try to listen to the positive lyrics, it's a Friday, yeah, then it's a Saturday and Sunday. The words then sound like, it's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, and then a Tuesday, and I scream and shout in agitation. I then jump in the shower, and I find myself singing, it's a Sunday, just shut the hell up, man. Just stop it. Just accept the fact that you are going into work for another week. And in that moment, while I am showering, I can smell body odour coming from somewhere. I recognise the body odour, as it belonged to an obese male colleague of mine who committed suicide at work. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, and then a Tuesday, and as I stare at him in horror, I start to sing along with him. Then a third person joins in the singing, while I am showering, and it's another colleague. Then in my bathroom, I have everyone in my office just singing in my bathroom. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, and then it's a Tuesday. Then it was just me singing the song while all of my colleagues are listening while I am showering in the bathroom. It's a Sunday, then it's a Monday, then a Tuesday. What a horrid, depressing existence this is. Pat was relaxing at home, enjoying a glass of whiskey, when he received a text. He opened it up, and there was a photo of his wife and daughter and son tied to a chair. He froze in fear. It had written underneath, "Look under your bed. There is a burner phone attached to the left side. There is one number programmed into it. When that number rings, there will be instructions on how you can stop your family getting executed. If you go to the police, your family will be dead, so don't try anything stupid. A few minutes later, Pat had retrieved the burner phone from under his bed. He wondered should he call the number before receiving a call. He decided to call it, but there was no answer. A few seconds later, he received a message. It read, "I told you, when the number rings, there will be instructions. Don't call this number again." Pat was wondering should he call the police, but decided not to. It must be some maniac has his family. What sort of sane person would do something like this, he told himself. A few minutes later, the phone rang. The voice on the other end said, "Hello, Pat. You will have one chance to let your family live. If you mess up that chance, then you can kiss goodbye to your family, and you will never ever see them alive again. There is no GPS in this phone, but put in the following address I text you into your GPS tracking on your own phone, and you will be able to have your chance of saving your family. Remember, don't go to the police. If you do go to the police, I can guarantee you right now that your family will not survive an hour after you telling the police. Now, we're not going to waste any time, so you can come to the address I message you as soon as you receive it, which should be right after I hang up." The phone went dead, and sure enough, a few seconds later, an address was sent to the burner phone. Pat put the address into his GPS tracking device and jumped in his car and went there. The address was an old, unused warehouse outside of town. He wondered was his family kept captive inside. As soon as he parked the car, the burner phone rang. "Hello, Pat. The door is open and will lock when you are inside. Walk in. I'll stay on the phone." As soon as Pat was inside the door, it banged and locked behind him, and the man spoke again. "Well, Pat, you might see an ordinary-looking room with different things around it and dots on the ground. Well, Pat, you are going to play a special game I designed myself, which is called Join the Dots. I was inspired by the classic game Join the Dots, hence the reason I have dots on the ground. You have to walk from each dot to the end of the room. Different things will happen you as you step on each dot. I will tell you what they are just before you step on each dot. But remember, Pat, don't try to do this fast. You will know why soon. Well, the first dot, Pat, when you pass it, there is going to be a burst of fire pop up from the floor. Also, I almost forgot, you don't have to finish any of these dots, and you won't be harmed in any way if you don't even complete the first one. But on the other hand, your family will be all executed by being shot in the head. Now, to make it even more exciting, there is a time limit. If you don't get it done in the time limit, which is 2 minutes, then you can forget about ever seeing your family alive again. Well, the game begins now. Pat was in shock with what was happening. He shouted into the phone, "You sick bastard, leave my family alone." The man said, "Pat, drop your phone, you don't need it. I can speak through the speakers now. You have enough on your plate besides holding a phone. By the way, Pat, the time is ticking." Pat walked fast towards the dot, and when he stepped on it, a large burning flame went up through his body and ended so fast he hadn't even caught on fire. He was walking towards the next dot, and a voice spoke. "This dot is going to release nails under your feet. long enough to make you feel a lot of pain, trust me. Pat stepped on the dot and screamed in pain when 2 large nails went right through his feet. He walked on towards the other dot. There was only one more after that. He could do it, he told himself. The man said, "The next dot, Pat, will be shards of glass forced out a chute right towards you for a few seconds." Pat walked on the dot, and shards came flying at him for what seemed like hours, but were only seconds. He reached the final dot, and wondered what it was. He was told, "This is going to be a surprise, Pat. There will be 2 holes, just big enough for you to put your arms through. Just roll up your sleeves and put them through." Pat put his arms through it, hoping for it to be over. He was in fear that he was going to get his arms cut right off, but suddenly he felt a needle prick his arm. Then he felt like floating on air. He heard the voice say, "Now, Pat, I can't get my daughter back, but this makes me feel a little better. You might ask why the dots? Why join the dots? Well, I'll tell you why. Why? Because of all the dots from needle marks, or train tracks as they call them, in my deceased daughter's arms, from your drugs you pumped her with, and so many other people. Well, now you're going to feel what it's like to be in pain. I wondered should I give you enough till you overdose, but I had a better idea. I wanted you to experience a high before the low. You're high as a kite now, I know, but when you come down, when you come out of the clouds, you will be able to see the pain you have caused. You're going to wake up to your family dead from your poison. You see, Pat, each dot you stepped on, a person injected your poison into your family, and I'm sure they were dead by the second one. Well, on their way, but very good you did 4. And good for me that it takes time for them to die. Do you remember I said you would never see your family alive again if you didn't step on the dots? I meant it. You will see your family alive. The wall raised and Pat could see his family tied to a chair, slipping more and more out of this world, with needles stuck in their arm. He knew within minutes or seconds they would be dead. The man said, "Now you know what your poison does to people's families." Jack and Linda were devastated one night in 2015 when their beloved dog Huck had gone missing one day during the summer. They both hoped for a week on end that the dog would turn up, and even though it was chipped, they didn't seem to be able to track it. Jack put it down to criminals stealing the dog and removing the chip. Linda didn't want to buy another pet, as she said it would just cause too much emotion with her and her loving memories of Huck. In 2020, Linda was sitting out in the garden, enjoying the sunshine, when she heard something move in the garden. She was surprised, so turned around. To her surprise, she saw a dog with an uncanny resemblance to Huck. It had been 5 years, and she wondered, how could the dog have came back after all this time? She couldn't help herself, so she called the dog in a friendly tone. "Here, Huck." Suddenly the dog barked very aggressively. Linda was surprised. She thought of something, but wouldn't find the bravery to check with the dog being so aggressive. But still she saw it. The brown patch under Hulk's neck proved to Linda it was really Hulk. She was so happy that he had returned, but wondered what made him so angry. She couldn't believe her eyes. After 5 years, Hulk had finally came home. She was going to call her husband, but had decided to surprise him when he came home. That evening, when Jack had come home and saw what Linda's surprise was, he seemed to have gone pale. Linda wondered what was wrong, as she was certain Jack would be delighted to see Hulk return. Suddenly Hulk jumped right up and mauled Jack until his body was lying on the ground lifeless. That night she had a call from her friend Mike. She listened in shock to what Mike had to say. "Linda, I can't understand what is happening, and I'm sure there is an explanation, but I was the only one Jack had told. 5 years ago, Jack accidentally ran over Hulk in the driveway and killed him. I helped him bury Hulk. Linda, I don't know how this is possible, but before I called you, I went to where we buried him. The dog's bones and everything are gone. There is nothing there." Linda heard a noise behind her, and Hulk was standing right next to her and started barking, then jumped right for her. Sharon was looking for a place to rent, and she spent hours and hours looking through different rooms and apartments. The prices were way out of her budget. She felt like she would have to have a super high-paying job to even pay the rent, don't mind the cost of living on top of that. She kept looking at different houses, and there was a great choice. But that great choice came with an even greater price, and not greater as in value, but greater as in a very high price. She was about to give up when she had to look twice to see was she seeing things, or were her eyes playing tricks on her from staring at the screen for so long. There was a really nice apartment complex in what looked like a lovely neighbourhood near where she wanted to rent. What caught her eye was rent a room and a living room plus use of swimming pool, entirely free in this beautiful spacious house in a beautiful neighbourhood. You will be able to stay indefinitely, but just need to take part in a training session to help finding ways of bettering ourselves through a modern day type of experimental wellness therapy. When she scrolled down to the bottom of the page, under the photo of the complex, it had written in bold red writing, "If interested, please reply as soon as possible, as there is only a few positions to be filled." The complex can hold plenty people, as it has more than 30 spacious bedrooms and leisure rooms, etc. But apply right away if interested, before spaces are gone. Sharon didn't even begin to consider not applying when she had already clicked on the button below which said apply now. She filled in all the information and was delighted when she got a reply back saying, "Thank you for applying to stay in the wellness mansion. You just have started the journey to changing your life to bring out the best in you." Sharon wondered what exactly did the experimental wellness therapy mean, but she guessed it couldn't mean anything bad. A week later, Sharon was in her new room in the wellness mansion. She felt like being in a posh hotel. Her room had a TV and was decorated beautifully. She was lying on her bed relaxing, scrolling through Instagram on her phone when a man entered. He smiled and said, "Hello, Sharon, and good evening to you. Welcome to the Wellness Mansion. You must have read what it said on the site about this being the first step of your journey to becoming a better you. And that is true. But that phone you were just looking at, I'm afraid, has to go. You will not have to worry about food or any bills, just as once you 100% apply yourself to this therapy." Sharon said, "Well, I'm afraid I need my phone, as I have to stay up to date with all my social media feeds. But don't worry, I won't be on my phone all the time." The man said, "I'm very sorry, dear. I need your phone right now, or else I'm afraid you need to exit this wellness mansion and make room for someone who will apply themselves fully to our rules." Sharon felt a pang of fear and dread, wondering what he meant by apply themselves fully to our rules. Suddenly she feared she just made a terrible mistake coming to the wellness mansion. A few hours later, the same man came into her room and said, "Okay, dear, we will be doing the first test run of what's to come. You might think this is a bit of real heavy work and feel like not even trying, but if you do, then I'm afraid you will not be able to live in this wonderful house rent-free. But if you do apply yourself to this very, very simple test, then you, my dear, will be qualified to stay here, and we will teach you to be the best version of you." What Sharon was told to do was do exercise until an alarm went off. She was given different exercises and thought it would be just a few minutes, but she nearly passed out a few times as each exercise went on for what seemed like hours. Each time the alarm went off, she just had a few minutes to organise what she needed for the next one and had to do the exercise non-stop until the alarm went off. After the last alarm went, the man entered Sharon's room and clapped, saying, "Well done, my dear. You did absolutely fabulous. You now have full use of this house." The next day, Sharon was walking down the hall when a man said to her, "Hello, how are you doing?" Sharon said, "I'm great, thanks. I'm a bit stressed though about what I was made do last night." The man's pleasant expression changed, and he grabbed Sharon by the throat and said, "Don't complain. You don't know how good you have it. Just do what you're told, and if not, then you will suffer. But on the other hand, if you do what you're told, you will gain more than happiness. You will gain euphoria." Sharon was shaking with fear after the man said what he said. He let go of her, and she ran back into her room and shut the door. She shook in fear, realizing that there was no bolt in the inside to lock herself in. The next day, she was made do extreme exercises for hours and hours, and when she told them she wanted to go home, a man gave her a phone to scroll through the photos and said, "That is what happened the last person who wanted to go home." She nearly got sick when she saw different photos of a person being brutally tortured in different ways. There was a weird red siren in the background where the man was being tortured. She asked what was the siren there for. The man said, "Thanks for showing interest. Well, just put it this way. Hopefully you will never see that siren go red and flash, because if you do, then that's the end of you." Suddenly Sharon got her fork and stuck it in the man's eye while she stuck the knife in his neck and ran out the door. She was feeling lucky that no one was in the hall to stop her, and before she knew it, luckily she was outside, safe in the street. She ran across the road and an elderly lady said, "Oh my goodness dear, what's wrong? Please come in dear." Sharon was shouting, "Help me, call the police, please call the police," and was about to go in the door when she saw something in the window of the woman's house. It was a red siren. The man's words came flooding back to her. Hopefully she will never see the siren flash, because if she did, it was the end of her. Sharon had realized the woman must have been one of them. She ran down the street, but as she ran, she noticed on every single window, in every single house, there was a red siren flash. She panicked as she was surrounded by people all over the street, and she knew there was no escape.
Someone found it by accident. God knows what they were looking for in the first place. The website address is a series of random letters and numbers, and of course, like all secret dark web addresses, it ended with a .onion. You need special software to find it. It's called Tor. There is no Google in the deep web, no browsing. You have to know what you went there for. But some people think of themselves as explorers, and try to find web addresses simply by typing random combinations of letters and numbers. Supposedly, that's how they found Jane Woodbridge 813. That's how the story goes anyways, but I don't believe it. But then, I don't know how anyone else would have found it. The site itself is just a black screen with a video player at the center. The title of the video is written at the top of the screen. Nothing else is written anywhere. The video has no audio. I first saw it when I was 13, back in 2006. It stayed with me. It wasn't graphic, but still, I never forgot it. Which is why what's happening now has been keeping me up every night. It's like this nagging thing I've had in the back of my mind since I was a kid, and now it's at the forefront of my brain. It's all I think about. When I was 13, my best friend's older brother lived in their basement. Every now and then we would go down and try to get a turn at whatever PC game he was into at the time. One day we went down to find him reading a forum. We asked what game it was for, but he said it wasn't a game. It was for a video that had been going around. He hadn't seen it yet, but he heard rumors. He followed the instructions on the forum and found the site. It was locked with a username and password prompt. He read something he had handwritten on a piece of paper and typed it in. The prompt disappeared, and then there it was. Empty, save for the video player. He said I have to close the door before he could show it to us. I did. He pressed play. The video was shot from inside a house looking out through the old window to the backyard. In the middle of the yard was a girl. She was a teenager, but I couldn't tell exactly how old, maybe 16 or 17. She was leashed. It was wrapped around her neck, a chain running down to a pole on the ground so she couldn't move very far. At the moment the video started, she was standing awkwardly and looking at the cameraman, as if waiting for something. Beer cans were strewn all across the yard, and as I mentioned before, no audio. The camera jolted right. At the same time, the girl looked in the same direction. The camera couldn't see anything past a few feet ahead of the girl since it was being recorded indoors. But the girl could see it. Whatever it was that made them both look, it was ahead of her. She began to cry. She pulled at the chain and the pole, but they wouldn't move. She turned to the camera person, her cheeks red and wet with tears. She begged. The cameraman's hand popped up in front of the lens. He pointed an index finger straight down. The girl seemed to understand the gesture. She still cried, but now she closed her eyes, and one leg at a time got down on her knees. Then she bowed, her entire body bending until her face was down on the grass. Her hands stretched out in front of her. She turned them palm up and raised them as if she was worshipping. The video ends there. My friend said it was lame and called me out to play. His brother was interested. He remained for days trying to find answers, but there were none. I wasn't sure what to think. And then, as time wore on, there would be nights just before I fell asleep that I would see her there, kneeling on the grass. I needed to know what was standing in front of her at that moment. More than anything, I needed to know what she saw. Once, a year or two later, when we were sitting at the back porch, my friend's brother joined us as he smoked a cigarette. I asked if he ever found out who the girl was or anything else about that video. He said no one knew the girl. He was talking about the entire online community. They had looked for every girl with that name they could find. Nothing ever came of it. But he did say one thing which was very strange. He said the brand of the beers that were all over the yard didn't exist. Not in America or any country. This was such a strange additive that, again, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then when I was 16, in the winter of 2009, a small news story went viral. The story was of a girl who had gone missing after going out for a walk with her friends. Two of her friends said she had been acting strange days before her disappearance, as if she was afraid or something. They had been walking home from school one day, and she just ran without warning. They couldn't catch up, and no one could find her after that. Her own parents confirmed that the two girls had told them of their daughter's behavior, telling the police she had recently developed a fear of mirrors. Her name was Jane Woodbridge. She was 17. Reddit and 4chan exploded with the news of it. Jane's photo was quickly released to the public, and yes, it was her, the girl from the video. But no one could believe it was true. The video had been released years prior to her kidnapping. The mystery only grew when photos of Jane as a 14-year-old girl were used for the 60 Minutes interview with her parents. They showed a much younger, much shorter, acne-ridden girl with chubby cheeks and big glasses. She did not at all resemble the Jane in the video. Some months later, Jane's body was found in the woods, where she had run from her friends and gone missing. The spot had been searched thoroughly by police and volunteers. The police and family did not disclose a cause of death, but they did say it did not look like a homicide. Between the day the video appeared online and the day she went missing, it had been 813 days exactly. After Jane's body was found, the Deep website, which had been locked again with a new username and password for 6 months or so after Jane went missing, was finally cracked. Some months later, Jane's body was found in the woods, where she had run from her friends and gone missing. The spot had been searched thoroughly by police and volunteers. The police and family did not disclose a cause of death, but they did say it did not look like a homicide. Between the day the video appeared online and the day she went missing, it had been 813 days exactly. After Jane's body was found, the Deep website, which had been locked again with a new username and password for 6 months or so after Jane went missing, was finally cracked. The video had changed. The inscription read Emily Forster, 12. The video began by showing Emily walking with her friends along her street. It is handheld, the camera person hidden and far from the kids. Emily's arms are crossed in front of her and her head is down. She suddenly runs, crossing into the woods. Her friends give chase. The camera person moves forward toward the woods. The video cuts to minutes later. The camera person hides as Emily's friends exit the woods, unable to find her. 4chan, Reddit, and other social media sites began the search for Emily Forster. For the first day of the search, the name was even trending on Twitter. 12 days after the video was posted, 16-year-old Emily Forster was reported missing after she did not come home from her job in Creede, Colorado. This was nowhere near where Jane lived. Her friends told police she ran while coming home. She had been quiet all day, scared of something, but she wouldn't say what. 6 days after she went missing, her body was found hanged in the woods 5 miles from her home. A second video was uploaded to the site that same day. I didn't know if I wanted to watch it. I remembered being awake those nights, just burning with curiosity and terror, needing to know what it was, what Jane had seen. As I paced my living room, trying to push myself to ignore it, I knew I would watch it, and a few minutes later, I did just that. Emily 12 Part 2 starts with a gritty video of a party. The camera moves among the older men and women, who smile and wave as they drink. The first thing I note, aside from the crappy quality of the video, is the attire. Men have big glasses, women have their hair sprayed stiff and curled, like something from the 70s, except it couldn't have been because as the camera reaches the kitchen window, we see her there, Emily Forster, taken in 2019 and chained to a pole. It is night, but there is a floodlight outside, and the identity of the girl is unmistakable. Emily stands and cries in the backyard. The cameraman raises his beer, the same beer as that which littered the yard in the previous video, as if giving her a toast. Emily is suddenly alert. She looks back to the dark behind her, listening. The man once again points to the ground, but Emily refuses to kneel. He tries 2 more times, but she stomps her foot in defiance. She turns to the black behind her, as if she heard something, and starts to scream. The cameraman turns back to the house. Everyone now has their back turned to the camera, all facing away from Emily. They stand there, their backs to us, doing nothing else. The video ends. Once again, I realized the timeline didn't add up. The first video of Emily running away was posted months before it happened. Again, I felt sick. I decided I was done with it. I left the site and the computer. I put it out of my mind and decided I wouldn't dig anymore. I didn't care who was next. I was done. And then, a few months later, the site updated. It was all over Reddit. Everyone was talking about the diary. I couldn't help myself. I went back on. Instead of a video, there was a picture. It was the cover of a red diary. The label read, "This diary is the property of..." But the name had been scratched off. There was an arrow at the bottom. I clicked it and the picture changed to the first 2 pages of the diary. The date read August 9th, but the year had also been scratched off. The first few pages were regular diary entries. It belonged to a girl in middle school, or at least it read that way. Then there was a really strange entry. Unlike the others, it wasn't about the boys in her class she had a crush on, or her friends who mostly liked her for her pool. This one was about her sister, who had died a year earlier from anaphylactic shock. It read, "It's been 1 year today since Cindy died. My mom said if I can't talk about it, I should write about it, and I definitely can't talk about it. It was the worst night of my life. I can still feel the bunk bed shaking. I hear her choking, but the worst part, even worse than hearing my sister dying, is how I just lay there, listening, too afraid to do anything, until finally the shaking stopped. She had been bitten by a spider. It wasn't super venomous, but she was allergic. Mom got rid of the bunk beds, but when I wake up, I still see her arm sticking out above me. Then my eyes adjust, and I realize I'm just looking at the ceiling. One night, I woke up feeling like I was being watched. The feeling was so strong that I was more scared of turning on the light than I was of being in the dark. What if I see what's watching me? And then I noticed that the terrible feeling was all coming from one spot in my room. Not a dark corner where something might be hiding, but the stand-up mirror by my closet door. I got up and walked over to it, hoping that seeing it up close would lessen my fear a little. But I still hadn't turned the light on, so all I saw was my silhouette. Something was off. I couldn't tell what. I couldn't see my face, so I don't know what it could be. But the reflection in the mirror, something about it was off. I threw a sheet over to cover it up and went back to bed. The mirror was tall and the top curved, so when it stood under the sheet, it looked like a person just standing there in the corner of my room. The feeling that I was being watched never went away. Actually, it got much worse. I kept it covered for the next 2 weeks. It was only when I absolutely had to pull the sheet off that I finally did. It was really late one night when I heard someone tapping on the glass of my window. My room is on the 2nd floor, so I was really scared to see who it was. A million thoughts ran through my mind while I got up and walked to the window, like maybe it was a vampire or just red eyes in the dark. When I finally got to the window and pulled the curtain aside, I saw there was no one there. It wasn't until that moment I had realized the tapping was coming from behind me. It was coming from the mirror. I was shaking worse than ever. My mouth was dry, my legs weak, but I had to know what it was. I pulled the sheet down. The tapping stopped. Again, it was too dark to see my reflection, but that wasn't my focus anymore because now I looked past myself to the rest of the room, and I saw something I didn't recognize. There was a TV in the same spot as mine, except it was a totally different model, like it was from a long time ago. And my bed wasn't my bed. It was bunk beds, like we used to have. There was someone sleeping on the top bunk. I could see her shape under the blankets, but not much else. And as I stood there watching, the shape began to stir. She woke up. It looked like my sister, but wasn't. Even though she was mostly hidden in the dark of the room, I could tell it wasn't really her. She became really happy when she saw me. She rolled from the bunk to the ladder on the side, her arms and legs stiff like they had been after she died. She limped toward me. I turned from the mirror and saw my room as it really was. There was no one in the dark, but when I looked back into the mirror, I saw what she really was. That was the end of the entry. I turned the pages, and on each one there was only one sentence, the same sentence written over and over again, sometimes a dozen times, sometimes hundreds. It still haunts me. It haunts me to wonder about what she saw that night, and the nights that followed. The sentence that covered the rest of the diary was simply, "Don't look in the mirror."
Rachel was enjoying her summer holidays, but had to save up for her college fees for going back to college. Last summer Rachel worked in a bar and enjoyed it, but since this summer had a lockdown and most of the bars and all the clubs were shut, she had no choice of securing bar work this summer. It was when she was in her friend's house one night that her friend Susie recommended the platform OnlyFans. Rachel first thought it was a disgusting, sleazy site, but had to admit the way Susie was telling her about it seemed appetizing, and the best selling point was she could make a ton of money from the comfort of her own home. Within a week, Rachel set up lights in her bedroom. She already had them anyway, as she used to blog a lot on social media, but never ever thought she would be doing such dirty photos, etc. She posted a few sexy photos, but nothing too explicit. Within a week, she was delighted to see that her followers were going up, and the first month she had made over 1,000 euros. After a while, she started posting exclusive content for her followers who would pay more, and she even got tips for no extra content. One night she received a very creepy message from a guy that paid her to pretend to slit her throat with a knife. She had an open mind at this stage, but still found it very creepy, a guy asking her to get a knife and pretend to slit her throat. The man got very pushy, saying he would pay more money if she did it, and he wouldn't take a no for an answer. So she just spoke a little bit more and then blocked him. That night, Rachel was walking her usual walk she used to do around the block in the evening when she heard a noise. She thought it might have just been a dog or a cat, but looked anyway. There was nothing there. She kept walking until she heard it again. This time she froze, wondering, could someone be actually following her? Suddenly a man appeared and she jumped. Then she screamed when she saw a man pull out a knife and put it to her throat. He said, "You stupid little bitch." Rachel was thankful she took karate classes when she defended herself and was able to knock the knife from the man's hand. Then she knocked the man to the ground and grabbed the knife and held it to his throat. He was smiling, and that made her blood boil. She picked his skin, and there was blood. Then there was more blood as she stuck it in more. He told her, "Okay, that's enough, babe. I loved that roleplay. I am absolutely so turned on." Rachel then said, "I am turned on more, knowing that I am going to add a little extra to your roleplay. I am going to actually cut your freaking throat for real." With that, Rachel sliced the man's throat open. The next day, she was looking through her phone to see what messages or tips she got on her OnlyFans, but she was surprised when she saw a DM from the man that she blocked. She wondered, 1, how could she get a message from someone she blocked? And 2, how can she receive a message from someone she know she left absolutely dead? She opened the message, and there was a link to a video. She clicked on it and saw a video of her slicing the man's throat. It was the CCTV footage, but she made sure there was no camera. No, it couldn't have been CCTV footage. It must have been someone filming her. But who? She froze to death when she saw what happened. When she walked away, the man had vanished into thin air. Suddenly she turned around when she felt like someone blowing into her neck. The man was staring right into her eyes and said, "You shouldn't have took it that far. All those creeps on that horrible app are just a bunch of losers. I am your only fan, worth anything, and you just let me die." Rachel was trying to figure out what was happening. Suddenly, she woke up from a nightmare. It all came flooding back to her now, her killing the man. She wondered how she turned into a cold-blooded killer just over a few strange roleplay requests. Suddenly her phone rang. Susie said, "Rachel, you wouldn't believe what this crazy guy paid me €100,000 for last night. He was completely nuts. He claimed to have some power to turn any idea into a reality. Would you believe that? He said to me make up some horror story about OnlyFans about my best friend. I told him some wild crazy story that a guy messaged you to play a roleplay game, to him go to stab you and then you really stab him and then you would have a nightmare after it, that the guy actually came back to life. Can you imagine? He actually paid me €100,000 for that, for some crazy stupid little story. I am extremely proud of myself for the ending. It really seemed to get him off." Rachel couldn't comprehend what she was hearing and asked Susie, how did her story end? Susie said, "He came back to life really, and first slit your throat, then teleported himself, or whatever, to slit mine." With that, the girls' phones were lying on the ground in a pool of blood, with them lying dead. Sophie was watching the news when she thought she heard someone in her hall. She put the TV off and went out and checked to see was anyone in there. Suddenly she jumped when she looked up her stairs and saw a figure duck into one of the rooms. She went back into the living room and rang the police straight away. She was scared an awful lot knowing in her town there was a serial killer attacking women in their own homes. This week so far, there were 2 murders, and the police knew that there was a high probability it was the killer in her home, so they arrived fast. There was a knock on the door, and the policeman went in and looked around to see was the man still upstairs, but he had noticed the window open, and he must have jumped onto a tree near it and climbed down to make an escape. The police officer told Sophie what he had seen and took a statement from her. He told her he would take another look around, but do not worry, as there were 2 police officers outside her driveway in a car watching her house. When Sophie was alone, she had an idea. She had an app on her phone that filmed her door whenever there was movement, even if anyone didn't know. She had realized the intruder might not have even been near the door, but she gave it a try anyway. When she went into her app, she had realized the camera did film someone at her door. She froze when she had realized there was a man at her door who was the exact same policeman who was in her house, looking around, except he had no police uniform on him. Suddenly she ran out to the 2 policemen in the car and had seen that both their throats were slit and one of them had their police jacket and hat taken from them. She heard a noise and turned around. When she turned around, she saw the man who was posing as a policeman. He smiled and said, "You should have checked your app before you let a stranger in your house." Then he lifted up his gun and shot Sophie in the head. Tony was in the woods last week with a few of his friends, and they were with this guy that was new from school, who claimed to know all about black magic. Tony and his friends didn't take him seriously. The guy was called Gerald. Gerald had asked Tony did he know much about black magic, and Tony said, trying to keep a straight face, "Oh yeah, I could write a book on it." His friends knew he was being sarcastic. A few nights later, Tony was sitting down watching TV when he had spotted something on the ground that hadn't been there before. He was trying to figure out how it got there. It seemed to be a book. The cover was just plain, and the book didn't seem to have any title. He began to start reading it. He read, "I was just sitting down, relaxing, reading, when I started hearing weird sounds, but I didn't know which direction they were coming from. It just seemed like there was a weird sound in my ears. Then suddenly the lights went out for a second and came back on again." Tony felt a shiver run up his spine as the lights in his living room had just gone out the second he had read that the light had gone out, and then the light came back on again, just like written in the book. He began to read on. He read, "I was wondering what was happening. I felt weird, but I didn't know why. I couldn't explain what was happening. Then suddenly a light entered the room." Tony was freaking out at this stage, as there was a light entered the room after he read about it happening in the book. He had decided to just shut the book and forget about it, but his curiosity was getting the better of him, so he read on. He regretted reading it as soon as he read the sentence, "Gerald walked into my room and went to attack me." Tony knew martial arts, so was ready for him and threw him over his shoulder. Gerald hit his head off an ornament and blood poured from him. Tony knew he had killed him. Tony knew it was self-defense, so had decided to call the police. But before he rang, He saw a page on the floor. He read what was written on it. Gerald will come back to life and possess your body. Tony turned around and, without even being able to react, was possessed by Gerald. And then Gerald spoke in Tony's body. Now, Tony, you will be able to write a book all about black magic.
Vamos a jugar en el 43.
I can't help if you don't talk to me.
You won't believe me.
If you tell me you saw Bigfoot or some creature in the woods, I will believe it. I promise. Tell me your story.
There were no creatures, spirits, or monsters. It was just me. It was my first time as a caretaker in Yellowstone. I barely knew the place. But when I saw it for the first time, I fell in love instantly. I was in complete awe of it. The mountains that reached up to the clouds, and the valleys which cut beneath them. The forest which ran vast and all-consuming throughout. And then there was the wildlife. It was overwhelming in its beauty. And people left the park in November for the winter season. And that's when I came in. I was to remain there until the plows could reach me towards the end of winter. I was the only one in my section, alone for miles and miles. My job was to clear the snow off the roofs of some of the buildings and structures. That was pretty much all I was supposed to do, but it kept me busy. There was always more snow to clear. I enjoyed the solitude. I'd been craving it for some time. When night fell, my cottage was the only source of light. The entire landscape, mountains, rivers, and the forest, all of it was dark. It was like an ocean of black, if you can picture it. And a tiny pin drop of light in the middle. That was me. I read books and made dinner. That's how I spent my nights. One day there was a storm. The snow was falling so thick and so fast that I couldn't get past my own front door. I decided it was too dangerous to try going out, so I stayed in, knowing that I'd have to do double the work the next day. But it was okay, because it was better than being caught outside in a storm. That could be death if you couldn't find shelter. That night after dinner, I read as I normally do. But as I did, I noticed a strange sound. The soft, wet hum. I heard it before, only when I was absolutely silent, but I could never place where it was coming from, or what it could be. So I forgot about it. I kept reading, and when I was too tired to read another word, I turned out the lights and went to bed. It woke me from a sound sleep. I was so tired and disoriented, I wasn't sure if I had heard something or if it'd just been a dream. Slowly I came out of my fog, and then I knew it hadn't been a dream. There was a knock at my door. I couldn't imagine who it could be. I was miles away from anyone, and in a storm, it would be impossible to get to me. I tried to look out the window by my bed, but it was too dark. I picked up the gas lantern and lit it. Then I moved to the door. When I opened it, the wind hit me like 1,000 needles. I aimed the light out, but there was only snow and darkness. Beneath me, though, I did notice something. Footprints. They led from my door to just outside the window where my bed was, then back out into the black. Sudden terror came over me as I looked out over the dark. I closed the door and latched it shut. After sitting in fear for a few moments, my exhaustion caught up to me again. Though I was afraid, I could think of nothing I could do. So I put the light away and I lay in bed. The following morning I woke up and remembered, but I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the front door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, part of me knew that the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had really been there at all. The sky looked just as bad as the day before, but if I didn't clear the roof before another storm, the other stations could cave in. I can't express the fear I felt walking through the woods that day. Any noise sent shivers up my spine. I was convinced someone had been there last night, watching me sleep. But if it was true, why wouldn't they wait for me to open the door? And how could they have survived the storm? I cleared the roofs from the other buildings, and as I did, it began to snow again. By the time I started my journey back to my cabin, the snow was too thick to see through. I was caught in it, and worse, I was lost. My compass seemed to be working, but the more I followed it, the less I recognized my surroundings. My feet burned from the cold, my bones shivered. Then, darkness fell. I thought that was it. I would die right then and there, frozen in the woods. And then I saw a light. I thought maybe I had left the lantern on, but I remember turning it off. But I didn't care either way. I was glad because the closer I got, the more I realized that yes, it was my cabin, and I was home. The door was locked when I tried to pull it, but how could that be? Unless I was wrong. Maybe this was someone else's cabin. Maybe I wasn't as far from the other caretakers as I originally thought. I knocked and waited. The wind blew cold all about me. I moved to the window and saw the person inside. It was me. I stumbled back into the woods and hid. I watched the person inside open the door and looked out, the lantern held out ahead of them. I watched closely, trying to understand. Then they quickly went back inside and closed the door, as if they were afraid. Against all odds, I found my way back to the buildings I had cleaned and slept inside. I nearly froze to death that night. The next morning, I stood in the woods and watched the cabin for as long as I could before approaching it. When I finally did, I found it empty, and the door was unlocked like I'd left it. It felt foreign to me now, like I was in someone else's home. Like when you have to stay at a stranger's house, except all the things in it were mine. The only thing familiar was the smell. It was tart and sour, but in my time here I'd grown to love it, and I was home. Outside, the world was frozen. The life and beauty I had been struck by when I first arrived had long since faded. I was afraid of the day because I could look out my window and see what was outside. I didn't want to see. But of course, the day was nothing compared to night. I needed the heater, but it lit the cabin from inside. I felt naked, exposed. I couldn't see anything past the windows. The only thing in them was my own reflection. I lifted the mattress off the bed and leaned it against the glass. I didn't need the bed. I had no intention of sleeping that night. I sat across from the door and watched it. Every time the wind blew and shook the door, I felt my stomach turn cold. At first, I couldn't tell if I was really hearing what I thought. The screams swelled and faded, or maybe they were just shrieks of wind pushing through the pines. I found the lantern and opened the door. The world was black. The light ahead lit only a few feet in front of me. I could see snow on the ground, snow falling in tiny specks, but nothing else. When it came from my right, I would aim the light towards it. Seconds later, it would be on my left. It was in front of me. It was behind me. It was close. It was far. I was terrified, and before long my fingers began to burn. I had to go back. When I did, I put the mattress back down on the bed. I was too tired. Fear and vigilance had taken it all out of me. I lay in the bed and listened, but there were no more screams. I had dreamt it, and I decided, or imagined it. If it was real, she would have seen my light. She would have seen it by now. The orange glow of the heater through the window. If it was real, maybe I would see her footsteps in the snow in the morning. Or perhaps she would wake me with a knock. These thoughts swirled in my mind, but I knew they were nonsense. I just needed sleep. And so I closed my eyes and did just that. The following morning I woke up and remembered that I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, part of me knew the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had truly been there at all. There was no way to know. I looked out over the ice and the dead trees and the leaden sky, which seemed like a concrete slate about to drop. I couldn't face it. I couldn't go out and do my job. I knew something was out there. I didn't know what, but it was there. Between the trees on the other side of the hills. I sat on the floor facing the door again. I stared at the wood of the door and listened. I wondered about her, the woman who screamed. I wondered if she had died in the night, and if so, would she come now? Would she come knocking and ask why I didn't help her? In the silence of the day, I could hear it again. The strange hum. The wet, sticky sound I knew I could never place. And then something fell in front of me. Small like a speck, but solid. I leaned down to it. It was white and wriggling. A maggot. Something tickled my hand. I looked down and saw another maggot crawling across my knuckles. Another one dropped from above, falling on my shoulder. I lifted my eyes up. On the ceiling, there was the shape of a small square door. I had forgotten about it. Forgotten about the attic. It was too small to go into, meant only for storage. At the edge of the square door, maggots writhed and dropped. Something was there. Something had been there the whole time. That I could place it now. It was the sound of 100,000 maggots feasting. I moved the heater to the center of the room and used it as a stepping stool. I climbed it and reached for the door on the ceiling. The smell, the familiar smell I've grown to love, was overpowering here. My eyes stung, my throat closed. I lifted my head to the attic. His small body entirely covered by them. A blanket of maggots so thick I couldn't even see him.
Did you remember then that you hadn't come alone?
Yes, I remembered.
They still haven't found your wife. Is she up there in the hills?
Just behind them. They'll have to wait for the thaw. It was a brutal winter. I tried to tell her there was nothing out there, Nothing but ice. But she ran anyway. She ran for me when she saw what I'd done to our son. She ran begging for help, screaming for it. But there was no one out there. I listened to her screams until they died down. Until there was only silence and dark.
Why did you do it? Didn't you love them?
With all my heart. Too much. It was all I knew. It was suffocating. Some men shouldn't have that much love. Some men should just be alone.
Jason was a kleptomaniac since as long back as he could remember. Ever since he could steal, he would. He remembers his mom used to get so mad at him when he was a small kid for stealing different items from his peers at school. His mother didn't experience anything else bad about his behaviour apart from the stealing, although there was one very distressing experience his little brother had when they were both small. They were in the woods and Jason stole his father's gun, and there was a dog that seemed lost. Jason used the gun to shoot the dog dead, and his brother started crying, but Jason just started laughing and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." Jason's brother Simon told his mom Susan, and she grounded Jason for almost a month. But when it came to stealing, he wasn't in the need for anything. He just had the impulse to steal as much as he could and as often as he could. If he was inside a restaurant, he would steal the knife and fork, and sometimes even plate, even though he had many more at home that he stole. He was caught a few times and even spent a few months behind bars when he was 21. He had counselling to try to stop his impulses to steal, but nothing worked. He kept stealing as much and often as he could. One time, he even stole from his own best friend. They were out for a drive. Jason's friend Jack stopped at a gas station to fill up. While his friend was inside paying, Jason stole his friend's phone and put it in a secret pocket in his bag. No one could find it there. As they were driving up a lonely road, they knew that they were in the back of the Beyonds, and there was no GPS in the car, so they were lost. Jack regretted driving so much out into the outback. Suddenly he was startled as a dog stood right in front of the car. The car swerved and crashed right into a tree. Jason got a flashback of years and years and years before when he shot the dog out in the woods. Jason was knocked unconscious and was in a very bad way. Jack tried to get his phone from where he left it on the car's dashboard, but could not find it. Jason was bleeding very badly and could not speak. Jason knew Jack's phone was in his secret pocket, but he could not manage to get the words out. Jack kept looking for his phone to call 911, knowing the paramedics would have to come in at least 5 or 10 minutes at most, or else he would be gone. He knew it was too late when he saw Jason go pale and the blood began to pour out of him even more. Jason died knowing his stealing finally caught up with him.
We had heard about the sickness for weeks. Rumors of people dropping in the streets, being run over by carriages and left to rot. No one would touch them for fear of being infected. In just hours, whole villages were seeing symptoms, hundreds dead in days. I lived in a small farming village with my mother and father. We were secluded where we lived. There were only 4 houses spread over 20 miles. People from the cities would drift by on their way to safety and tell us what they'd heard about the fever. But no one else came after a while. Not even the mailman. A week, a month, 2 months passed, and we hadn't seen a soul. My father and mother decided to leave, but I told them I couldn't come. The family that lived on the last farm east was very dear to us, and they had small children. I told my mother I would go to see if they were okay and ask if they would come with me. After that, I would follow my parents south to where my aunt lived. Mother cried, but I would not be swayed. I watched them leave as the sun rose over the dirt road. I had a 20-mile walk in front of me, and so I began. There are those who doubt my story after this point. Some say I'm simply lying. Others speculate I had the fever, and what I saw was only in my mind. I know I wasn't sick. I wish it was all a terrible hallucination, but I know what happened was real. It is midnight on the 3rd of November, 1723. I am a condemned woman. I am scheduled to be hanged in the morning. I have no reasons left to lie. This document will be seen only after I'm dead. Let this be my last testament. As I walked the path, I noticed a distinct silence in the trees. Sounds I had heard all my life were simply gone. And then I heard her. She was coming down the path. A smile arched across her face. She moved lightly, almost skipping. Not a care in the world. A large crimson stain sat dark at the frayed neck of her dress. Blood. "Are you okay, miss?" I asked as she passed by. It wasn't until she was only inches from me that I recognized her. The look in her eyes and that terrible smile made it hard for me to notice at first, but now I could see it was Mrs. Shannon. She lived on the farm closest to ours. She had never been one to smile. She didn't look at me when I talked to her, only continued to sing. I assumed then that she had the illness and her mind was gone. I watched her for a few minutes and then turned and kept going. After about a minute, I looked back. She stood about 100 yards away with her back to me. Her head was turned sideways, listening. I ran the rest of the way. I arrived at the house just as the sun began to set. I knew something was wrong as soon as I laid my eyes on it. There were no cows in the pasture, no goats. I jogged to the front door and knocked. Nothing inside moved. Flies buzzed in the kitchen where dirty dishes sat out exposed. Maggots slithered on the plates, finishing what was left of a week-old dinner. A trail of blood led to the back of the house where the bedrooms were. I moved slowly. The smell was even worse here. Mr. Peters lay on the floor beside the bed. His neck was torn and blood had pooled black beneath him. He'd been dead for days. Something moved in the closet. I hadn't seen the children. I had to check. Though I have to admit at this point I was terrified. I tried to keep quiet as I opened the door. It was the eldest, James. He was cowering in the corner. I took him to his room and gave him some of the water and food I had brought. I asked him what happened. He told me the whole story. A few weeks ago, a drifter had come to town with a fever. Mrs. Shannon let him stay in her barn. He told her it wasn't the illness that made him sick now, but that he had been attacked by a vampire on the road. She thought he was delirious. After he died, she and her husband buried him in the cemetery. A few days later, Mr. Shannon told his wife he had seen the man outside. The drifter said he needed his shoes. They had fallen off while they were transporting his body. After a few moments, the man left. For the next few days, they were plagued by knocks at their door during the night. One of these nights, Mr. Shannon had enough. He went out with his gun and told the man he would shoot him if he didn't go. The man began to laugh hysterically. Mrs. Shannon didn't see what happened, but when morning came, she went out and saw her husband dead on the ground. James told me that a few days prior to my arriving, Mrs. Shannon came asking for help. She said her husband had crawled out of his grave and was trying to get into the house. James's parents turned her away, thinking she was either sick or telling the truth. Either way, they were too scared to open the door. Mrs. Shannon returned not long after. That big grin, those wild eyes, she smelled of rot. She would come in the night, sing songs outside their windows. He told me his 8-year-old sister Elizabeth was the first to die. For reasons no one could understand, she had gone out of bed just before dawn and walked outside. He remembers having dreamt of a girl screaming for help. When he awoke, he realized the sounds were real. They found her a few hours later, sitting against a tree, a few yards into the woods. All the joints in her body had been twisted the wrong way. Before they buried her, his father bound her broken wrists with a rope and salted the earth above her. After a few days of hiding in the house, they ran out of supplies and decided to leave. His mother was killed while trying to gather goats. James and his father took their guns and searched the woods for the vampire, but there was no sign of it. They left her body where it fell and followed the road north. When night came, they found themselves surrounded. They would hear laughter coming from the forest and running feet cutting across the path behind them. James swears he heard his mother calling for him to come into the woods. In a panic, they headed back to the house. His father was briefly attacked along the way, and by the time they got inside, he was just barely breathing. I asked James if he knew who it was that had killed his father, and he told me it was his sister, 6 days after she died. In the end, I decided it didn't matter if it was true or not. James was weak and needed help. There were still usable supplies at my house. We had to leave. It's safer in the day, he told me. He wouldn't budge. He wouldn't let me bury his father either, but at least he let me put the body outside. The silence was still palpable. There were no crickets, not even a gust of wind to make me feel better. It was as if someone had taken our little village and cut it out from the rest of the world. Before I went back inside, I scanned the tree line expecting to see only darkness. There was a small purple dress obscured by low branches near the edge of the forest. At first I was elated. I could tell it was Elizabeth. She was caked in dirt. I thought because she had gotten lost in the woods and finally found her way out. I took a few steps toward her. She returned the favor and started walking to me. Her bones were all broken. She limped across the road like a puppet on strings. Each step she took would tear a new piece of flesh or crack another bit of bone. With absolute horror, I studied her face. She only smiled and held out her arms to me, wrists still bound. I ran back inside. James and I barricaded ourselves in the back bedroom and waited. I turned the lantern down to just barely a spark. We sat in the dark and listened. We heard his mother calling outside. "James, Mommy's waiting." I could see the tears dripping down his cheeks. Elizabeth put her eyes between the cracks in the wood. "Don't you miss us, brother?" James begged her to leave. She said she would, but first she had to tell him something. He leaned in near the wall and she whispered in his ear. Then she left as promised. James sat without saying a word. He picked up the lantern and raised the flame. I asked if he was okay. He opened the globe and poured the oil down his throat. In seconds, he was covered in flames. I screamed. I wanted to help him, but there was no way. The room was overcome in just moments. I rushed to escape. Smoke filled every inch of the space. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. By the time I stumbled outside, it was almost dawn. I was so overcome by the smoke in my lungs that I lost consciousness. When I awoke, there was nothing left of the house or of James. A gash ran across my wrist. I had lost a lot of blood in the night, but I could still move. I tore a piece of my dress and wrapped the wound. When I could walk, I wandered north towards the closest town. Somewhere along the way, I heard the light and ringing of a tiny bell. I came across a cemetery and saw that the bell I was hearing was from a grave. Someone inside was pulling it as if to say they had been buried alive. I walked to it, and as I did, another bell began to ring. Then another and another. I ran and never looked back. I thought I'd hurt my wrist while leaving the house, but now I realize that while I was unconscious lying on the grass, they fed. In a few hours, I'll be put to death for something I did not do. The people here think themselves civilized. They don't believe in monsters. I tried to warn them, but they won't listen, won't take precautions. They'll bury me tonight, and tomorrow morning, I'll be ringing my own bell.
Dig deeper at sessionsx.tumblr.com.
Sharon was walking down the street, sure that someone was following her. She didn't dare look behind, as she would rather just walk on and hopefully get to somewhere where there were people around, other than turn around and have someone attack her. It was getting dark, and she saw a train station across the road, so she walked across to it. When she got into the station, thankfully there were other people in the platform, but strangely, she didn't feel any bit safer. She thought about getting on a train, but decided to just wait by a group of people first to gather herself. She assumed it was just her paranoia, but there was something bothering her that she didn't know what it was. People were acting strange, and she had noticed there were police around. She had wondered why there was no train, as she was standing there for a few minutes now. There were lots of people looking down in the track, across a tape that said "Police line, do not cross." She didn't realise sooner because she seemed to be in a daze, wondering why she was feeling so strange. She wondered what all the people were looking at. and when she walked over and looked down, she screamed with horror as she looked down at herself, dead on the train line. She was screaming and screaming, but no one seemed to take any notice of her. She had then noticed someone had made eye contact with her, and they seemed to notice her. They walked over to her and said, "Did you just realize you're like me, one of the dead?" She spoke on. "Don't worry, it gets better. I watch the news to see where there are local deaths. That way at least you can talk to someone." Sharon froze, taking in the words that the girl was telling her, realizing she was dead. Hello, my name is Martin. It was a sunny day in June. Me and my friends were visiting a local park where there was a very big house and a beautiful garden. The house was open up for visitors to look around, and there was a shop and even a restaurant. I am a huge fan of mazes, but was never in one in real life. I just did them in books and comics or wherever I came across one. The main reason I wanted to visit this park house was because I knew there was a maze there. When me and my friends arrived at the maze, I was so excited, but I felt that excitement drain away when my friends said they weren't going in because they heard a story that one time a boy our age went in there and was never seen again. I told them that it was just a silly urban legend that wasn't true, but they were adamant they weren't going in. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I couldn't understand why. I told them, okay, if you want to spoil the party, that's okay, but I'm going in and enjoying the maze. Besides, if anyone was going missing in there, don't you think we would have heard of a lot more people going missing? I walked in and was amazed at how high the ditches were. I could feel the excitement overcome me. I felt that my friends were missing out so much, but suddenly, after a half an hour walking around there, I felt for the first time a pang of fear, and a few minutes after that, I wish I hadn't gone in. I shouted out loud to my friends, but all I could hear was the echo of my voice fill the air. I suddenly got the weirdest feeling someone was watching me. I panicked, thinking it was the boy who vanished, who my friends were telling me about. I walked around and around and around. I had enough of the maze now. I wanted to get to the exit to get out of it. Suddenly, I heard some shouting, and to my relief, I realized it was my friend Sarah. When I got out of the maze, I acted like I wasn't afraid and said, "That maze is so cool. I was walking around for hours, it seemed like, and I genuinely couldn't find my way out. They must have designed this maze so well." That night I was in my room, but that was when the weirdest thing had happened. I walked out of my room, and when I walked into, which should have been my hall, I was in my room again. I suddenly saw a door in another direction, and once again when I entered it, I was in my room. This kept happening over and over and over. I could not make any sense of it, because I could look back and see my room, and turn around and look in the door and see my room again. I was panicking, thinking of the maze, knowing what was happening to me in there is happening to me right now in my own bedroom. Suddenly I fell over something when I was going through the door. It was a book. I picked it up, and the title read, The Maze. I opened it up and read the first page, and a shiver ran up my spine. The publishing date was 2020. and the year at the time was 2010. I looked at the writer's name, and it was my best friend Sarah. Then I read, 10 years ago, my friend entered a maze that me and my friend warned him about, and he never was seen again. We had warned him of exactly the same thing happening another boy years ago, who we cannot find out who it is. I stopped reading, then jumped when I heard a voice behind me. I turned around. My dad was staring right in front of me and said, "Son, don't be afraid. That maze gave you a secret magic that will make up for any friends you may never have seen again. You will understand as time goes on. I know, trust me, I was that other boy that went missing." Hi, my name is Siobhan. I was really stressed lately and needed a breakaway, so decided to pack up work for a week and book myself into a lovely looking hotel in a really nice resort in Florida. Judging by the photos online of it, the place was exactly what I needed. I just needed to get away from everything for a few days, so hopefully a week would do the job. When I had all my luggage packed, I got the cab to the airport and was on my way to Florida. I was so happy knowing I would spend the next week away from all the stress of everything that was going on lately. I was very confident I would feel so much better after the break. When I arrived, I checked in and got the elevator up to my room, left my baggage and headed straight for the beach. It was so relaxing just lying down on the beach, with the air blowing in my face. I felt like I was just about to feel the benefits of what I'd feel spending a whole week in this beautiful resort. That night I was in the hotel's bar, and I was feeling kind of fed up, thinking that in a week I'd be back to my ordinary life and the troubles and stress will be waiting right for me. But I knew I just had to make the most of being here. Suddenly a guy walked up to me in the bar and said to me, "Hello, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I just saw you sitting there and you looked kind of lonely and a bit fed up, to be honest, and I was wondering, would you like some company?" I looked strangely at first, wondering, did I really look that fed up? And then I replied, "Well, sure, thanks. I guess I'd enjoy some company." The man asked, "So, where are you from?" I told him I was from New York and decided I needed to have a break away from the stress in the Big Apple. He smiled and said, "Do you know something? That makes a lot of sense to me, and trust me, this place is like a paradise. If you like, I can show you around sometime." I smiled and said, "Sure, that sounds like fun." Then the man said, "Oh, by the way, pardon my manners, I didn't even ask your name. My name is Sam. What's yours?" "My name is Siobhan. Nice to meet you, Sam." The next day, I was relaxing on the beach with Sam. He spoke. "To be honest, when I saw you alone and looking kind of down, I had to come and say hello." I looked confused and asked him why. He replied, "A few weeks ago there was this beautiful girl who was sitting by herself in the bar, just like you were, and well, she looked to be upset over something. I was going to introduce myself and ask her would she like company, but I didn't. And well, the next day I found out she was after committing suicide by jumping off her room's balcony. I felt so sorry for the girl and told Sam that there was no way of him knowing she was so upset and was going to commit suicide. That night me and Sam were in the bar having a few drinks and speaking. I wondered would it be too soon. When we were in my room, we sat in the bed and had another drink. Sam stood up and said to me, "Do you know what I love most about this hotel? The beautiful view from the balcony." We both walked out to the balcony and were admiring the view. I said to him, "It's beautiful." Suddenly Sam put his hand on my back and was about to push me over when I took my taser out of my pocket and tasered him. He jumped back, feeling surprised I was ready for him. Then I said, "That girl you were telling me committed suicide. We both know that she didn't jump." Then I held my phone up and showed him a picture that was taken of him without his knowledge, with text underneath it saying, "Help, call the police, this man is going to kill me." I called the hotel and asked for my friend Lisa, who you pushed, but when they had sadly confirmed to me she had committed suicide, then I had an expert in facial recognition do a background check on you, and boy was I happy to know that you were working in this hotel. I knew the police would let you off, so I have my own idea of justice. Also, thanks so much for letting me know what type of lunatic you are by wanting to push me off the balcony also. But I'd just like to know why. Why would you want to kill an innocent woman after just killing an innocent woman just a few weeks ago? With that, the door was knocked open, and I heard police shout, "Stop, police!" They walked over to me, and they couldn't even see the damn man lying on the ground. I was cursing this hotel's CCTV footage for picking up my face and letting them finally see me when they were looking for me for months. And I was wondering why, because I knew I was on the run, but didn't know why. It was months later I had learned there was no man. I suffer from a condition called dissociative disorder, which means I was the man, but there was never a man, and it was me who killed my friend. Hello, my name is Roy. It was a winter's night. Me and 3 other people were invited to spend the night in a room that had a prize for just staying there. It was a very attractive idea, as we were sent links of photos and videos of the room. It was just an ordinary room with no crazy stuff in there. First I was wondering, would there be saws and torture equipment in there like the movie Saw? But the link showed photos and videos of the room, as I said, and it seemed harmless. But let's get back to the prize. The prize was $100,000. I first wondered was it a prank or a joke, but I decided to give it a go. I mean, what harm could it do? The night came, and when I arrived there were 3 more people, a couple and a man. We started talking about how we were sent a link to take part and how we were reluctant in taking part. There was no one greeted us at the room. We were just sent a link on our phone that gave us a tracking device to give us GPS directions to get here. Then there was a room with a code to enter in the middle of an abandoned building. It was all really creepy. There didn't seem to be anything in the room, just 4 boxes and 4 TVs on the wall. I was wondering what it was all about. Then suddenly one of the TVs came on, and a person in a hood and mask came on the screen. "Hello there, and welcome to the room. As you know, if ye stay here ye will win $100,000, and that is true, but there are just a few tasks that ye have to do first. There will be 3 of the TVs on the wall changed to a live stream in just under 2 minutes, and then you will see that I will give ye instructions. on how you can win your $100,000. And remember, you can all win $100,000 each. Just follow simple instructions, and the money is yours. Suddenly, 3 of the other TVs came on, and a couple and a man were in shock when they saw what was on the screen. I could see my wife strapped to a chair, gagged, and the couple started screaming as they saw their 2 kids, a boy and a girl, strapped to a chair and gagged, and a man had been screaming about his wife, which also was strapped to a chair. The man spoke again. Well, I wasn't disappointed with the shocked reaction, but let me explain why you're watching your loved ones attached to a chair. But before I do, I have a little surprise for you. Suddenly a masked figure walked up to each person in the videos. The man spoke again. What you're watching is a video of your loved ones, and the people holding a gun to their head are ready to shoot them dead in just under 30 minutes. Unless you do something very easy, just put the gun to your head and pull the trigger. And yes, the guns I will give ye are loaded. There is a box in front of ye, and your guns will be in there. Just pop in the code trigger happy, and your box will open, and then retrieve your gun. Remember, you have 30 minutes. Also, I'm going to throw ye a lifeline. If ye aren't up to killing yourself, then if you kill another person in the room, then your family will be free. Same as if you kill yourself. Your family will be free, and no harm will fall upon them. It's really easy and exciting, so let's start the game, shall we? We all stared at each other in shock, trying to take in what was happening. The man on his own spoke. What is this? I can't let my wife die. I said, don't do anything stupid. 10 minutes passed and no one shot themselves or each other. But after 15 minutes, the man shouted, I can't take this anymore, and pointed the gun to the man who was with his wife and shot him. Then he shot the man's wife and then shouted, I'm not a killer, but they're going to charge me for murder and put me in prison for a crime that I only did out of love for my wife. With that, the man shot himself in his head. I was standing alone in the room, in shock, wondering what would happen next. Then the man came on the TV again. Congratulations! It looks like things worked out very well for you in this situation. Your wife will be freed and free to go. With that, the door of the room clicked open, and I walked out in shock and rang the police and explained. Luckily, I had secretly filmed the TVs with my phone and was able to show the police. My son was just 13 and walking out of a garage when one car bashed into another, and well, the first one went smashing into my son, killing him instantly. The car sped off, but I had the presence of mind to ask my friend Fred to wipe the CCTV, as I knew if the license plate numbers were given to the police, then the justice they would be served wouldn't in any way equal my justice. They might not even serve time. So luckily my friend Pat had a great idea. He would use his contacts to get their plates looked up, find out who they were, get them matched to the CCTV to make sure no one would be in the wrong. He had his gun loaded with 2 real bullets to shoot the couple, and the third one for himself, which was a fake bullet, which would blast him with fake blood. Very realistic. You might wonder how Pat had got away with it, since the police would be looking for his body. But that was all sorted. They did find his body, which was changed very fast after the couple were killed. Pat had used the mask of an addict we shot in the street. Pat had an amazing skill in creating lifelike prosthetic masks. The hardest thing about it was lifting the addict's body in. It was so heavy from the dead weight. I sat back, really happy with myself, and my wife happy also, knowing that me and Pat and her were the only ones that really knew what really happened in that room. I thought of the police watching the video, thinking they had evidence. That I was a victim traumatized that survived hell. Then I smiled and said to my wife, "It just goes to show, it's not always you can trust what you see." Then what about the gunmen who were holding the guns to the people's heads? Well, I've only 2 words. Deep fake. Susie was walking down the road one night in the countryside when she was surprised by hearing a phone box ring. She wondered who would be calling a public phone box, especially in the middle of nowhere. Well, it was near a bus stop, but besides that, no one was around, unless they were waiting for the bus, of course. She had decided to answer the phone when she was surprised to hear a man's voice. "Hello, is anyone there?" Susie said, "Hello, yes, I'm here. I'm sure you must have the wrong number. This is a public phone box." The man spoke again. "Oh, maybe I did call the wrong number, but thank you very much for answering and letting me know. I must say, you have a very nice voice. I am very sorry if I put you out of your way, but it was very nice to speak to you anyway. I guess you must be wondering why I'm calling a public phone box. Well, it was very nice to speak to you. I hope you're having a good night." Susie felt strange, a stranger calling a phone box, asking her was she having a good night, but she liked how he spoke, so replied, "Yes, I'm having a great night, thanks for asking. I'm just waiting for the bus to go home now." The man said, "Oh, I'm very glad to hear you're having a good night. So the public phone box is near a bus stop then, I gather." Susie was enjoying the chat with the man, but realised the bus was coming, so quickly said, "I'm very sorry, I have to go. The bus is coming. It was nice talking to you. Bye." The man said, "It was very splendid talking to you also. Bye now." Susie walked into the bus and felt happy for some strange reason. About the phone call, the man had left a good impression on her. She was wondering, was it his voice or what he said, and she wondered what he had looked like. When she got home, she told her sister Rachel all about it. "I was waiting for the 10 o'clock bus, and well, I was very surprised to hear the public phone ring in the phone box right next to the bus stop. I answered it, and there was this really sweet man on the other end. And, well, we had a lovely chat, but unfortunately the bus came before I could even tell him my name." Her sister smiled and said, "Wow, what age was he? I wonder what he looked like. Maybe he looked like a film star." Susie said, "I'm not sure what age he was, and of course I have no idea what he looked like, but he seemed so sweet." Rachel said, "Are you going to wait at the bus stop again tomorrow night to see if he calls? How do you expect him to call the same phone box again at the same time? It obviously was a wrong number he dialed." But the next night Susie made sure to be waiting for the 10 o'clock bus again, and was pleasantly surprised when the phone rang again. She ran into it and answered, "Hello? Hello, Susie. I am very happy that you were waiting for the bus again, and you answered the phone. I was hoping you would. I hope you're happy that I rang this phone again. Are you, Susie?" Susie said, "Well, yes, I kind of enjoyed speaking to you last night." The man said, "Well, that is splendid. Our feelings are mutual then. Tell me, Susie, is there anyone else waiting for the bus? Are you alone?" Susie said, "Yes, I'm alone. This is a very quiet road, you see. Not many people ever wait for this bus." The man said, "Oh, it must be in the middle of the country then, Susie, since not many people catch the bus." Susie saw the bus coming up the road and said to the man, "I'm sorry, the bus is here." The man said, "How about we continue our conversation tomorrow night? Same time, Susie?" Susie agreed. The next night at the same time, the phone rang again. The man said, "Susie, I'm not sure I even told you my name. My name is Fred, Susie, and do you know, I love your voice, but I would love to be able to put a face to that voice. How about we meet in person, Susie? Would you like that?" Susie thought about it, then quickly said, "Well, yes, if you would like that, sure." She gave him the directions to the phone booth and told him she would meet him at 9:30 tomorrow night. Back at Susie's house, her dad was reading a newspaper article about a serial killer at large in their locality and the surrounding areas of the countryside around their village. He was worried she was out late and was just about to call the police when she had walked in the door. Susie felt a strange feeling. It was like she was in love. She felt it strange knowing that she hadn't even met the man, but still felt strangely in love with him. She told her sister about her meeting him tomorrow night. The next day, when Susie asked to go out, her dad said, "No way, you're not going anywhere tonight." Susie was mad until her sister had an idea that maybe he would allow both girls go to the cinema together. Rachel was going to the cinema while Susie would meet the man. Rachel said to Susie, "Look, Susie, I was thinking about this. Maybe it's a bad idea. You were going to meet this man. I mean, he could be anyone. He could be a madman for all we know." Susie laughed it off and said she would meet him, and was sure he would be a really sweet guy. When Susie was on the bus, she heard a conversation between two people who were talking about a serial killer at large, a man who was targeting young women. Susie felt sick thinking of the stranger she was about to meet. She stayed on the bus and knew she couldn't go home, so she would go back to the cinema and join Rachel. But Rachel was worried about her sister and had already gone to meet her by the phone box. When Rachel was outside the phone box, she had been calling her sister's name, but all she could hear was her own echo. Suddenly a man walked out from the ditch and said, "Hello, Susie. It is so great to finally meet you." Rachel froze as the man went near her and she kicked him. The man said, "Oh, now, that's very nasty out of you, Susie. Very nasty indeed, and I have to punish you for that." He dragged her into his car and put her in the boot and shut it. Dave was walking through the woods at 10 p.m. when he thought he heard a noise in the bushes. He looked around and saw no one, but he sensed there was someone watching him. He never walked into the woods more than a mile because everyone that knew the woods knew that it could take hours, if not days, to find your way out the further you went in. It was like a maze after a while. He continued to walk on when suddenly two people in black jumped out of the bushes in front of him and held a gun to his head. They said, "Don't move and you won't get hurt. Me and my friend here have a little game we like to play. It's called The Hunt. You, my friend, will be human prey. We are going to give you a head start of 10 minutes, and me and my friend here are going to hunt you down, and if we find you before midnight, then we will shoot you, of course, and you will be dead. But just for the slightest chance of you surviving past midnight or escaping these woods, then you are free to go. Even if we spot you after midnight, you will be free to go. You will have your freedom. Dave was shocked at what the man just said and was about to walk back from the woods so he could leave, but the man said, "Do you think we are stupid? You are not allowed to go that way. You're only meant to go deep into the woods. And don't think about coming back. We have dozens of more people on the lookout in case you decide to leave the easy way. But don't worry, it's just me and Bert here who will be hunting you down when you go that way deep into the woods. You ready to go, boy?" Dave said, "I'll go, but please don't kill me," and Dave ran and ran. 10 minutes later, the men followed him. Dave luckily knew of a great hiding spot that hardly no one knew except himself and his son, who unfortunately was murdered just a few weeks ago. Dave hid in a small little cave that was hidden by trees that he hoped the men didn't know of. Luckily, Dave spent most of the time there, and when he got out at 2 minutes to midnight, he exited the cave to be greeted by the two men holding the guns right to him. One man said, "Hey there, boy, did you really think we would be stupid enough to not know about that little cave there? And do you know there is still 2 minutes left? That is plenty time for us to shoot and kill you. And guess what? That is exactly what we are going to do." Dave lifted a rock, blocking his face as the men shot him several times in the chest. Dave fell down. The men walked over to watch him die. They looked down and said, "You were such an easy prey." Dave smiled up at them. The men wondered why he was smiling after being shot several times. One man asked, "What's so funny?" Dave said, "Ever hear of bulletproof vests?" Then he pulled a rope and a trap fell over the two men. Then Dave said, "That boy you hunted down and killed a few weeks ago was my son, and I could have killed ye back then, but I wanted to hunt ye bastards when ye were hunting your prey, which unluckily for ye was me." Within seconds, Dave turned into a werewolf at midnight, which he knew he always did every single night there was a full moon, and he chose tonight to be the night he would wander down the road knowing that they would try their luck at finding prey. He prayed that they would be looking for prey tonight. As he turned into the werewolf, he released the trap and bit their leg, hand and arm off, watching them squirm in pain. Then he said, "I was your prey, but now let me pray for ye. Now I lay ye down to sleep. I pray to the devil your soul to keep. When ye should die in this place of doom, I pray the devil keeps ye a very hot room." And then, within seconds, they were dead. There is a Japanese urban legend called the Cowhead Story. The name might sound kind of strange or even funny, but the urban legend has a very sinister background story. The most sinister thing about the story is that the story is so scary and so haunted that no one can ever tell it without dying. The legend talks about the story which is basically a group of students, one by one, that notice that their teacher is becoming more and more involved in the story and living it. After a while, the students are screaming for him to stop. The worst thing is, he can't. A while later, police find the bus in a ditch, which is all of the passengers foaming at the mouth, and legend has it they were in some sort of trance. The police shook them awake, and when the police asked them what happened, no one could remember how they ended up there. The cowhead story has no recollection of it. Some theories might pop up every so often, but maybe there are no solid conclusions because of the one thing that might stop people from telling the story, and that is the story is so scary and so haunted that no one can ever tell it without dying. I didn't want to say this, and I'm not using my face just in case I might get haunted by whatever legend it is. But when I first told the story of it, there was some weird kind of old video popped up when I was animating it as if mocking me. It was my voice speaking, saying, "You won't be able to put this on, but I will put it on YouTube for you." I was wondering what it is, and what it was. It kind of creeped me out. It was almost as if it happened because I was telling you the story. I felt like, and I still feel like, even after me deleting it, that I am haunted now. What?
I let myself go blind. When I was 25, I was told that my sight would fade away like a TV losing signal. Hard shapes would turn soft, and eventually they would be nothing but a current of running colors. Then black. More than black. Nothing. Hard to describe nothing. But that's what I see. But it didn't have to be this way. Not yet. If I was diligent with my medication, if I followed the set schedule and paid attention to the signs that my body was giving me, it could have been decades before I lost my sight. I could lead a full, happy life if I chose. That was 7 years ago. I never took a pill or went to an appointment. I never tried to save my eyes, and I was glad to have them rot. The food deliveries come weekly. Everything I need is brought right to my door, and the things I don't are taken care of without my having to step a foot in the hallway or even take my trash to the garbage chute. The world beyond my door is unknown. In my apartment, I know every inch of the floor, every corner, every bureau and coffee table. I can move around without a walking stick. I can even jog if my phone is ringing in a distant room. I have no fear of getting hurt like I did in the early days of my disability. I live here on my own. I am safe. I am content. When I do speak to people, on the rare occasion where I must, they always ask, what happened? But I can't tell them it was preventable. They wouldn't understand. I woke in the middle of the night. I had been in a deep sleep, but when I woke, I wasn't tired or groggy, but my heart was pushing against my chest in heavy thuds, like it was trying to break through the bones that kept it safe. I didn't remember having any bad dreams. Why was I so scared? Or was I? My body behaved as if I was terrified, but my mind had no way to place it. I lay there and hoped I would eventually be able to calm down. I forced myself to slow my breathing. I gripped the sheets under my grimy palms. It worked. The chills in my back warmed. My anxiety dripped from me in thick waves of sweat staining the mattress beneath me. Now that I could feel my body calm down, I felt something else. Something mundane. I had to pee. I smiled. A thought like that can only occur to somebody who's not in danger. It had all been in my head, some forgotten dream. So I hurried to the bathroom. Before I knew what happened, I was falling. My shins had smashed into something in the middle of the room. 3 of my fingers bent back and cracked beneath the weight of my body as I dropped to the floor. My head knocked against the hard wood, and for a moment I lost track of where I was. The pain in my hand was so blinding I could hardly think. But when I did think, when I did come back to my senses, body still throbbing, I only had one thought. The coffee table had moved. I didn't want to believe this. I didn't want to remember. But I knew. There was no mystery here. I knew who had done this. In a way, I'd been waiting for this day for a long time. I had been waiting for her. I picked myself up, the broken fingers cradled like a bloody claw in my hand, and limped crooked to the bathroom, careful not to run into anything else along the way. The apartment was foreign to me now. This was no longer a home. It was a foxhole. I locked the door and ran the cold water, letting it numb my hand. For a moment, the relief was so great, I almost forgot to be afraid. When that moment passed, I realized I hadn't checked the bathroom to make sure I was alone. I listened. She was here. I could hear the shower curtain blowing forward and easing back like a flag pushed by a chilled breeze. My heart locked like the first time I saw her. It was the clearest memory I had of my life before losing my sight. I was a child. My sister and I had been playing a game in the living room during a storm, which caused a blackout. Without TV, games were all we had to keep ourselves entertained. When we had finished all the regulars, ending with Battleship, it was time to go over something more substantial. We decided on finally finishing a full game of Monopoly, which meant I would have to go to the basement. I remember the sound of thunder, like some creature roaring in the dark. I could even smell the rain, but the storm didn't scare me. I wasn't afraid of anything at that age, not even the basement. The light was very bright since my father had replaced the single bowl with a set of fluorescent tubes. The stairs, which had once been rotting wood, were now metal steps, and the silver surface caught the white lights in such a way to make you feel like you were going down into a spaceship. The floor was cement, newly finished and bright gray. There was nothing to be afraid of. I moved to the shelf where the game sat and ran my fingers along the boxes until I found Monopoly. She was already there, sitting against the wall, holding her knees, her face buried between them. At first I wasn't afraid because I didn't understand. She wore a white dress, though the bottoms were caked in mud. I opened my mouth to speak. She lifted up her eyes to meet mine. They were full of tears and mourning. But when she saw me, she blinked the sadness away, and all that was left was hate. She stood. I ran up the stairs, screaming for my mom. When I told her what I'd seen, she took me by the hand and led me back down the stairs, pulling me by the wrist, nearly popping my shoulder out of the socket. With each step we took, the air in my lungs was taken from me as if we were going underwater, as if my mother was trying to drown me. She tried to explain. She knew there was no one here. She had already come down to the basement. She already checked every inch of it. It was empty, she told me. But I wouldn't let it go. I knew what I saw. And so she dragged me, screaming and wailing, down and down, one step at a time. And as we went, I looked to the corner where the woman had been. First I saw her feet, bare and bloodied, then the muddy dress, and the sharp nails spiking from each finger. "See?" my mother said, pointing to the woman. "There's no one here. Nothing. It's your imagination." I couldn't move. I only stared. When I said nothing, my mother let go of my hand and marched back up the stairs, mistaking my fear for resignation. She left me there on my own. And as soon as she was gone from sight, the woman in the basement attacked me. I spent weeks, sometimes months of my childhood in hospitals after that day, with doctors trying to understand my seizures. But how can a seizure break bones or leave scratches all over my body? I eventually stopped telling them what I saw. The medicine they gave me only made me drowsy. But it never stopped the attacks. And then one day, like a miracle from heaven, I was told I would go blind. No one understood my calm, my quiet acceptance. My friends begged me to take my medication, to take care of myself. But I knew that this was the only way to stop her from attacking me. She only came when I saw her, only when my eyes met hers. One by one, my friends fell away. I stopped leaving the house as my sight got worse, and I had no one to help me navigate the world beyond my door. The attack stopped. I was right. Or at least I had been until tonight. She was there, just behind me. I heard the crinkling of the plastic shower curtain, the broken exhale of the shallow breaths. Slow and steady as I could, I opened the bathroom door and limped my way through the living room, my legs brushing the coffee table I had tripped over. The door to the corridor outside my apartment was only 7 steps from where I stood. I imagined myself going through it, hurrying down the hall and the staircase. It had been so long since I stepped foot outside my apartment, I wasn't sure I could even find the stairs. And if I did, if I reached the street, I would have no one to call. Nowhere to go. I had so expertly separated myself from the world that I could find myself entirely alone, even on a crowded street. So I stood there, 7 steps from escape, and did not move an inch. The bathroom door creaked as it fell open. The floorboards whined closer and closer to me. "Why now?" I asked out loud. In that moment, I understood. This had been her plan. All my life, I had been with people From my parents to doctors, teachers, friends, I had never been alone. Not until I moved and let my sight fade. She had been waiting all these years while I cultivated a life of solitude, as if waiting for a fruit to ripen. She had been waiting for the moment when, even if I could run, I didn't have the knowledge or means to escape her. And even if I did, I had no one to call, no place to go. I had done this to myself. I had built a trap, and now, with ease and delight, she sprung it. Her chilled breath blew on my neck. Cold. It was ice cold.
I was 14 at the time. It was an ordinary day. It was a boring Sunday. I had no schoolwork to do or anything. Man, was I bored. So, I decided to go on Instagram for some entertainment. I was scrolling through some pictures and videos. Then all of a sudden, I get a DM. I say, maybe it's someone I know. I go to the DM to check it out. And it's from an older man who I have never seen before. He must have been in his 50s at least. He said that he was looking for a sugar baby. I just responded and told him to leave me alone and that I wasn't interested. When I think about it, I probably should have just blocked him. But then I told him that he was a creep and that I was only 14 years old. Thinking that was the end of it, he responds back to me saying that age is just a number and that he wants to come see me. I told him no, and for him to leave me alone. And I regret it to this day for saying this. But I told him, you don't even know where I live. Then he responds to me with my address and said he is coming to me now. I'm not gonna lie, that scared me a lot because that was actually my real address. I was a little freaked out, but I tried ignoring it and just continuing my day like nothing happened. The next day came and I left for school in the morning. I walked to school. It's about a 15-minute walk. Both my parents couldn't pick me up because they both work in the early morning. As I'm walking to school, I see a car behind me. It felt a little weird as if it was following me, so I ran down a random street to see if the car was actually still following me. And to my surprise, it was. As I was running down the street, I was out of breath and slowed down. The car pulled up to me, and it was the same man I saw on Instagram. I was in shock, and I didn't know what to do, but froze. The man said, "Come in the car, kid. I have some candy for you." I said no thanks, and to leave me alone. I started walking away. He didn't like that, so he followed me from inside the car, then pulled up in front of me, got out of the car, then grabbed me. I was fighting, but he was too strong. He was pulling me to his car. Then another car beeps the horn and says, "I'm calling the police." The man then lets go of me, goes back to his car, and drives away. The person from the other car called my parents, and I took the rest of the day off of school to calm down and relax. Missing school that day was the last thing on my mind. It's now 4 years later, and I haven't ever seen the man. I always thought about what would have happened to me if it wasn't for the other car that day. Would I still be alive? I never walked to school since. All I know is I'm lucky to still be alive, and I take every day as it's my last because you never know what could happen.